Welcome to today's lecture. In today's lecture, we will be discussing the Gaussian concentration inequalities. So the plan of the lecture is that we will start with what are called the Chernoff bounds for Gaussian. Then in the next part of the lecture, we will discuss the Jensen inequality. So the Jensen inequality is concerned with the behavior of convex functions. When we pass on the inequalities to the convex functions, we'll discuss that. And we are actually discussing Jensen inequality because we will need them for a concentration bound on functions of Gaussian variables. Okay, so this is the agenda for this lecture. We'll be discussing these three things. Some of the discussions will be common to the other inequalities as well. So we start our discussion with Chernoff. Chernoff bound for Gaussians. Okay. So there is a very standard trick that we will be using, uh, which we also saw in the previous lecture when we discussed master tail bounds. Not exactly, but suppose if we are interested in determining the probability that x is greater than or equal to a variable t, where we say that x is normally distributed and zero mean, and let's say its variance is sigma square. Okay, so this is equal to the probability that e raised to the power lambda x is e raised to the power lambda t. Okay, but we have this equivalence if lambda is greater than or equal to 0. Next we use the Markov inequality. So in the previous lecture when we were discussing master tail bounds, we took the powers of this random variable and then we applied the Markov inequality. So this time around we have taken it in the exponential and then we are using the Markov inequality. Okay, so why we are doing this is because okay, so this we have courtesy the Markov inequality. Okay, why we are doing this is because the expected value of e to the lambda x is just the moment generating function. Okay, so this trick that we are applying, it is applicable only to those functions for which the moment generating function exists. So it exists for the Gaussian random variable, and in fact the moment generating function for the Gaussian random variable with zero mean we have is equal to e raised to the power sigma square okay. So this becomes the moment generating so this is the moment generating function for the Gaussian random variable. So if we plug that value in, what we will get is that the probability that x is greater than or equal to t is less than or equal to e raised to the power sigma square lambda square by 2 minus lambda t. Okay, so we just plugged in this equation and we obtained this bound. Next, what as we did in the master tail bounds theorem as well, we select lambda to optimize the bound. Okay, we have to select lambda to optimize the bound, and that we can do just by our normal differentiation. So if we have sigma square lambda square by 2 minus lambda t, let us say if this is f of lambda, then when we differentiate it, we will get 2 sigma square lambda by 2 is equal to t, differentiate and equate it to 0. So then we get that our optimizing lambda is t divided by 2 sigma square. Okay, so when we substitute it in the equation, what we get is the Chernoff bound for the Gaussian random variable. Okay, then which is basically so when we substitute it there, we will get e raised to the power minus t square by 2 sigma square. Just be careful that this is just one-sided inequality. If we are looking at both bounds, then we have to use the union bounds of probability, and then we can get that expression. So this is valid for t greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so this is the Chernoff bound for Gaussian. We will often use this. This is only a one-sided bound, as we have to keep in mind. Okay. So next, we move on to the discussion on Jensen inequality. Okay. So what the Jensen's inequality says is that if we have phi is a convex function, okay, and then x is a random variable such that expectation of x is finite, such that expectation of x is finite, then the theorem says that then the Jensen's inequality or the theorem, it says that the expected value of phi of x is greater than or equal to of expected value of x. Okay, so this is Jensen's. This is the Jensen's inequality. Before going into the proof, if we consider just a simple example, then Jensen's inequality, it direct tells us that the expectation of x square is greater than or equal to okay. So this is uh, one example of a direct application of Jensen's inequality. Next, we go into the proof. Okay, so for any convex function, if we have to plot the convex function, then let's say if this is our phi of x, then consider this point to be the expected value of x. Okay, and then we can always draw a straight line tangent to the convex function. Let us suppose this line, let us denote this line by L. So because phi is convex, there is a tangent to the graph of phi at E of x, okay, such that at this point what we have is that phi of expected value of x is equal to L of expected value of x. Okay, here we L is of the form a plus bx. Okay, we can consider L is just a straight line. It is of the form. So at point expectation of x, we have that the function value at e of x is the same as the value of this line at e of x. However, at for any x, okay, so for any other x, what we have is that the function value is greater than L of x, because the tangent lies, because phi is convex, the tangent to the point of e of x, it always lies below. Okay, so this is one condition. Then if we take the expected value on both sides, then we get something like this. Then this is equal to, since L is just a straight line, we have a plus b expected value of x. Then this becomes L of e of x. Okay, and but if we plug in the above equation, then what we will get is this result. Okay, so we have proved that the expected value of the convex function uh, is greater than or equal to the expected value plugged in the function. Okay, so this is what we have got. So this is the Jensen's inequality. In fact, the Jensen's inequality, we have proved it for expectation. If we look at it, expectation is just an integral on the probability space. It can also be proved for integrals. Okay, we will not go into the proof for integrals, but we will just state the uh, the result for integrals. So phi is a convex function, like we already saw. Then the Jensen's inequality is something like this. Okay. Right. So if you see phi of expected value of x is less than, it is almost the same if you consider expectation. In fact, the proof also has the same flavor, but we will not go into the proof. Okay. We will just remember this inequality. Both these inequalities we will be using in the next uh, concentration inequality that we are going to discuss, and we will state that in more detail. So for that, maybe I'll change the color of the ink. So next, and the next theorem that we are going to discuss is a pretty long theorem. So suppose x is a random vector. Okay, and with independent and identically distributed standard Gaussian entries. Okay, so this is the first consideration. Then we have f is a function that is Lipschitz. So when we say f is sigma Lipschitz function, so when we say x is a sigma Lipschitz function, what we mean is that Okay. So this is what we mean when we say that x is a sigma Lipschitz function. Then the result that we have for every t greater than or equal to 0, probability that okay, so this is the result that we have. So what it means is that we'll just, if we just look at the implications before going into the proof, what it means is that if f is stable in terms of Gaussian inputs, then it is, then its values, then its values are well concentrated around its mean. Okay, this is what it means, and this is a remarkable result. It is a remarkable result in two ways. Because the first is that the inequality holds regardless of dimension. Okay, this is the first remarkable thing, because on the right hand side it does not depend on how big the vector x is or how many dimensions it has. And the second thing is that like a scalar Gaussian with variance sigma square. Okay, so the concentration that we see here, it is just like a scalar Gaussian concentration, which we derived earlier. It was e raised to the power minus t 2 sigma square. Had we put an absolute value on the value of x, then we would have obtained 2 here as well. The result is remarkable because even for functions of Gaussian random variables, n dimensional of functions of n dimensional Gaussian random variables, if the function is well behaved or if it is stable, then the concentration inequalities that we obtain, they are just like what we get for a scalar Gaussian with variance sigma square. Okay, so the sigma here is the sigma Lipschitz function. All right, so this is the main crux, or why this result is remarkable. So this we will not prove the exact result because we want to keep the proof simple. So we will make a few more assumptions. Okay. So when we start with the proof, now to keep the proof simple, we will make two assumptions, two additional assumptions. We will prove the bound with a weaker constant in the exponent. Okay, so here the constant that we have in the exponent is minus 1 by 2 sigma square. So we will prove the inequality wherever right hand side will be 2 e raised to the power minus 2 by pi square t square by sigma square. Okay, so this is what we will be proving it for. And the second assumption, And the second consideration that we make is that we assume that f is both Lipschitz and differentiable. Okay, so these are the two additional considerations that we'll make to just to make the proof somewhat easier. Okay, now the consequence is that now since f is differentiable, uh, by Lipschitz continuity, we have that the gradient of f is less than or equal to sigma. Okay, so this result, if you know, then it is good. Otherwise, you can just think of it as fx minus fy, and we take the norm of x minus y below, and this is nothing but how much the and if we take the x minus y to the denominator, then the ratio that we obtain is just if we change x, if we change x, how much will the function change, which is equivalent to sort of gradient or derivative. Okay, so this is what it means. If f is differentiable, this what we can do. Next, the next thing that we do is that by subtracting a constant from f, yeah, so the expected value of f will be a constant, we can assume that the expected value of x is equal to 0. Okay, so we just scale it, and then the third thing that we do is that we show only one sided bound. Okay, so even effectively what we will be proving is that uh, fx greater than or equal to t is less than or equal to okay. So this is what we will be proving. If we take the double-sided bond, the same result will hold if we do all the analysis by replacing x by minus x and take a union bound, and we will get the result. Okay, so in many of the proofs, since we are considering Gaussian and all those things, we generally start uh, by using the moment generating function trick. Okay, that is a very standard trick, and you should probably remember that trick. So what we have is and by Markov inequality we have this. Okay, so the derivation is very long, so you have to stay focused, and we'll be doing a lot of things. So this is a pretty lengthy derivation, or this is a very lengthy proof. Now, what we need to do is that earlier the only knowledge that we have is on the gradient of f. Okay, so what we need to do is upper bound. So, like in the Markov inequality, we knew the expected value. In Chebyshev, we assumed that we know the variance as well. When we did the master tail bounds, we raised it to a polynomial thing. So we had expected value of xi raised to the power r. So that was the information that we knew. So here, the information that is available to us is that on the gradient of f, so what we need to do is that we need to upper bound e to the lambda fx using a bound on the gradient of f. Okay. Now, the proof that we are going to discuss, I was looking at some of the literature. In some of the literature, it is also referred to as the magic proof, because many of the things that we are going to discuss, they seem to be just invented out of thin air. At least I felt so. When you look at the proof, maybe you will not think so, but my first impression was that everything is just coming out of thin air. Okay, so the key idea is introduce a random independent copy y of x. Okay, so this is what we will do, and then we will so this is the main idea which we start with. This is the main idea which we start with. Next we see what happens. Okay, so first thing is that the exponential function lambda multiplied by something is convex. Okay, so because I mean, it is easy to see. If you are not convinced, you can prove it, but the graph of e raised to the x goes something like this, at least in the scalar form. That is that means it is convex. Then we can apply the Jensen's inequality. So when we apply the Jensen's inequality, what we get is expected value of e raised to the power minus lambda fy is greater than or equal to e raised to the power minus expected value of lambda fy. Okay, so now the expected value of lambda fy is 0 because we assume that it is a copy of x. So this becomes equal to e raised to the power 0 equal to 1. Okay, so this is the first thing that we have, is that the is that the moment generating function sort of this is greater than 1. Okay, next what we do is to analyze the difference. So I'll change the ink. Okay, so next what we do is consider expected value of e raised to the power lambda fx minus fy. So just to reduce the number of brackets, I've written it in this way so that it becomes more legible. So this is equal to expected value of lambda fx. Remember that f is a function of x, so they are not in product. And this is e raised to the power minus lambda fy. So here we have used that x and y are independent. Okay, because they are independent, we were able to do this step. Now, from the previous step, we saw that this expected value is greater than. Okay, so the result that we obtain is e raised to the power minus lambda f of x. Okay, so this is what we get. So in the proof that we will be doing, we will be using something like this. Expected value of e raised to the power minus lambda fx is less than or equal to expected value of e raised to the power lambda f of x minus f of y. And next we will be working with this quantity. Okay, because we have established this bound, and for the rest of the uh, proof, we will be working with the quantity on the right hand side. Okay, but before going into that, and the first step in going is to analyze fx minus f of y. Okay, is to analyze fx minus f of y. This is what we will be doing, and if we utilize the fundamental theorem of calculus. Okay, so the fundamental theorem of calculus, it basically says that a to b f of t dt is equal to f of b minus f of a. Okay, so here we have f of x minus f of y. We can sort of change it into an integral, and when we see an integral, we'll change it to an integral, and then we will again apply Jensen's inequality. Uh, so we are doing all these things because we need we need to use gradient of f. Okay, so when we are doing gradient of f, in this equation inside the integral we will get a term that is sort of similar to gradient of f. That is why doing such a step is important, or it seemed necessary. Okay, but here we will be doing it in a slightly different manner. This is the step, but we'll be doing it in a slightly different manner. That is, we will fx minus fy Okay, so we need to do the path integral, and we took the path integral along a circular arc from x to y. So if you see here, at theta equal to 0, the this quantity, it becomes y, and at theta is equal to pi by 2, the quantity, it becomes x. Okay, just to give you an example, for those of you who are not very comfortable with the transformation that we have just done here, we will take a small detour. Okay, so let us just assume that f is equal to x square. Then what we will do is that the value of x square at b minus the value of x square at a is 0 to pi by 2 dou by dou theta x theta d theta. Okay, so after that, where we have x of theta is y cos theta plus x sin theta. But in this case, we will have x of theta is we have a cos theta plus b sin theta. Okay. So next, when we substitute it in this equation, since f is x square, what we will obtain is 0 to pi by 2 dou by dou theta of a cos theta plus b sin theta whole square d theta. Then this will be basically what we will do is that we will have 2 times a cos theta plus b sin theta multiplied by d x theta by d theta into d theta. Something like this we will obtain. This is basically just applying the chain rule. And this term here, this is nothing but the grad of f. Because this was on a single variable, we got a scalar. Now, if we do all the calculation, and when we solve it, everything works out. So we will use the same idea here as well. Okay, but there are some additional observations that we should note here. The first thing is that let us suppose x of theta for our case was y cos theta plus x sin theta. Here we will be needing an x prime theta, which is just minus y sin theta plus x cos theta. Okay, we just differentiated with respect to theta here. Now, fact number one is that x theta and x prime theta are independent. I will not prove this claim here. I'll maybe give that as a homework. Second observation is that they are Gaussian. So this the second observation actually helps. And the third observation is that in fact, if we calculate this expected value, we will get 0. So they are sort of uncorrelated as well. Okay, so these are the three observations uh, that we have. Next, I hope everyone is with me. So we got an expression, or we have a reduction or sort of an expression for fx minus fy, but what we are actually interested in is this quantity. Okay, the expected value of the exponential of lambda times fx minus fy. So now that we have an expression for fx minus fy, we will consider the exponential of lambda times fx minus fy. Okay, so the exponential of lambda times fx minus fy will be exponential of lambda times 0 to pi by 2 dou by dou theta fx theta d theta. Okay, this is what we have. Now we have exponential is a convex function, and we have an integral. So we can again use Jensen's inequality. But this time with respect to the integral, when we do with respect to the integral, what we had was that we need the length of the interval in the denominator. So for that purpose, we will multiply and divide by pi by 2. Okay, so for that purpose we will multiply and divide by pi by 2. So now when we apply the Jensen's inequality, what we get is 1 upon pi by 2 okay. Now we can rewrite this as if we have to do it properly, and we will actually replace the left hand side of the inequality with okay, not yet, only after we take the expectation we can do that. So what we have here is that the exponential of lambda times fx minus fy is less than or equal to 2 by pi 0 to pi by 2 exponential of lambda pi by 2 Okay, so this is similar to what we did in this example. First, we differentiate it with respect to the function, and then we differentiate the function also itself. So when we differentiate it with respect to the function, we will get grad of f, and then x prime theta comes as it is. Now, in the next step, we taking expectations. Okay, taking expectations on both sides, what we get is expected value of is less than or equal to 2 by pi 0 to pi by 2. Here we have taken the expected value inside the integral. Okay, exponential lambda pi by 2 okay. So why we can take the expected value inside the integral? There are we can give 2 3 arguments, but one is that expectation is basically taking an integral. Okay, and we and since f is Lipschitz and the gradient is bounded, and so this whole function is kind of well behaved. When this whole function is kind of well behaved, then we can well behaved in the sense that it is bounded. Then we can interchange the limits of integral. There is something known as Fubini's theorem. Okay. So that is my understanding of this. That we can interchange the integral because expectation is sort of also an integral. But we can also argue in terms of Jensen. But never mind. So we can take the expected value inside, and left hand side. Then we change it to what we already got in the previous result. That the expectation of lambda fx is less than or equal to this quantity. Okay, so I'll not write that again. Next, we will discuss the behavior of the quantity inside the integral. So next, if you consider the expected value of exponential of lambda pi by 2 okay, so then this the gradient is a vector, and x prime theta is also a vector because x and y are vector. So we just break it up into different components in this step. So we have lambda pi by 2, k is equal to 1 to n, x prime theta k multiplied by x of theta. So this is what we have done. We have just broken down this vector multiplication or the dot product in terms of its components. Now we observed that x and x prime theta are independent. Okay, this can be proved by the characteristic function. Okay, we'll take the characteristic function. Okay, the joint characteristic function is just the product of the individual characteristics function. So the expectation, we can break it up to be on the conditional expectation on x theta and x prime theta. So we can rewrite this as expected value Okay, and we have exponential So we have just broken down the expectation because the function is the quantity inside is a function of x theta and x prime theta. When we have to take the total expectation, we can break it down. Yeah, so I hope you are familiar with this thing. Now the entries in the vector x theta or x prime theta are IID. Okay. Now because they are IID entries, we can rewrite this in the following way. Okay, I'll do the direct step. Okay, so here this is Gaussian. Now the rest of the proof is sort of straightforward of how we did for the scalar term. Now because we have managed to reduce the vector and a function to a scalar term where everything is now bounded. So then since this is scalar and this quantity is also scalar, then when we are taking expected value of exponential raised to this is nothing but again like we did for the scalar function, this is the moment generating function. Okay. Now the moment generating function, so we can write this as expected value of x prime theta. This comes out from the moment generating function, that lambda square, like t square sigma square by 2. Okay, so this you can verify from the moment generating function expression. So substituting this value here, the next step we get expected value of theta is product k is equal to 1 to n. So actually what will happen is that we can write this product. When it goes to the exponential, it will become a sum, and we will get the squared norm of the gradient. Okay, so this is the expression that we will get when we will open this equation out. Then the product will become the sum in the exponential power, and we already assumed that the gradient is bounded. The gradient square is bounded by sigma square. So what we obtain here is that This is just a constant quantity. So this becomes equal to e raised to the power lambda square pi square by 8 into sigma square. Okay. So finally, what we have obtained here is that expected value of e raised to the power lambda fx is less than or equal to e raised to the power lambda square pi square sigma square by 8. So this is this is the equation that we have obtained. Now if we substitute this into the Markov inequality equation that we had in the beginning, then what we will get is that probability that f of x is greater than or equal to t is less than or equal to, so this is something we had earlier, lambda f of x divided by e raised to the power lambda t. So this is less than or equal to okay. Now the final step is just optimizing for lambda. So when we do optimizing for lambda, it's just the standard. I'll not do that again. So we get something. We get lambda star as this, and then the final bound that we obtain here is t square by sigma square. Okay, so this is what we get. So this is a very long derivation, but what it tells us is a trick. I mean, in some literature that I read, this is also called the duplication trick. So this is also called the duplication trick, where we use f of we will use an independent copy of y. Why you used, so if we look at the whole flow again, because this was a very long proof, we basically needed, somehow we needed to bring gradient of f, norm of gradient of f into the picture. So for that purpose, we invoked the fundamental theorem of calculus. Inside the integral, we will get the gradient of f. But do, uh, when we invoke the fundamental theorem of calculus, we need two values, fb and fa, or fx and fy. For that purpose, we said that okay, let fy be an independent copy of x. When we do fy, when we take fy as an independent copy of x, it enables us to use these two inequalities. Okay, so it doesn't matter, basically we say something, and then we used Jensen's inequalities a couple of times. First was to take the exponential inside the integral, and then the second was to take the expectation or something like that, and then everything else just follows by simple calculation. So the main ideas were that if we have to introduce a norm in the bound, then the trick that is used in this proof, norm of the gradient in the bound, then the trick that we discussed in this proof might be useful.